Hunters and hikers, what made you swear off the woods forever? I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, solo, through a section in North Carolina. It was a 3-day trip. On the second night, I set up camp near a stream. It was a beautiful spot, isolated, quiet, peaceful. I made dinner and was settling in when I heard whistling. Someone was whistling a tune coming from the woods. I called out, asking if anyone was there. The whistling stopped. Then it started again, closer. I grabbed my flashlight and swept the tree line. Nothing. The whistling moved, circling my camp. I could tell it was staying just beyond the reach of my light, maybe 30 feet out, moving through the brush. But I never heard footsteps, just the whistling. This went on for about 20 minutes, and I was getting seriously freaked out. I yelled for whoever it was to show themselves. The whistling stopped, complete silence. Then I heard my own voice coming from the woods saying, "Show yourself." It sounded exactly like me, same tone, same inflection. My blood went cold. Then I heard it again, my voice, coming from multiple directions. "Show yourself, show yourself." Over and over, getting closer. I grabbed my pack and ran. I left my tent, my gear, everything. I sprinted down the trail with my headlamp on and didn't stop for 2 hours. The voices followed me for the first hour, always just behind me, repeating things I'd said. Then they suddenly stopped. I kept running anyway. Eventually, I reached a road and flagged down a car. The driver took one look at me and knew something was wrong. He drove me to the nearest town. I filed a report with the Park Service, and they sent rangers to retrieve my gear. They found my tent completely shredded, ripped to pieces. My food was scattered everywhere, and in the dirt around my campsite, they found footprints, bare human footprints. But they were wrong. The toes were too long. The stride was too wide. They measured nearly 7 feet between steps. No human walks like that. The rangers told me I was the 5th person that month to report strange activity in that section. Voices, whistling, something mimicking them. They said they were considering closing the trail. I don't know if they ever did. I never went back. I still hike, but only busy trails, populated areas, never alone, never at night. And if I hear whistling in the woods, I turn around immediately. No questions asked. I was hiking in West Virginia in the New River Gorge. It's a beautiful area, popular with tourists. At some point, I veered off the main trail. I wanted to explore, to find some solitude. I hiked for about 2 hours, deep into unmarked territory, and eventually found a ravine with steep sides and a narrow creek at the bottom. I climbed down. The walls were covered in handprints, red handprints, hundreds of them, all over the rock face. Some were small, children's hands. Others were massive, bigger than any human hand. I took photos and started to climb back out. That's when the smell hit. Rotting flesh. Overwhelming. I gagged and looked for the source. I found it at the bottom of the ravine, a deer carcass. But it wasn't just lying there. It had been arranged. Bones laid out in a pattern. The skull in the center, ribs radiating outward, forming some kind of symbol. Then I heard movement above me. I looked up and saw someone standing at the top of the ravine, silhouetted against the sky. They were holding something, a staff or a pole. They raised it and pointed at me. Instantly, I felt cold, a deep, paralyzing cold. My muscles locked up. I couldn't move. The figure started climbing down, moving in jerky, unnatural motions, like stop-motion animation. I fought against the paralysis, managed to move my fingers, then my hand. The figure got closer, and I could see details now. It was wearing animal skins. Its face was painted red. Its eyes were completely black. It opened its mouth and screamed, a sound that wasn't human, wasn't animal, but something in between. The paralysis broke. I climbed, scrambled up the ravine wall, tearing my hands on the rocks. I didn't care. The figure chased me. I could hear it climbing, feel it getting closer. I reached the top and ran. I didn't look back. I ran until I hit the main trail and found other hikers. I told them what had happened. They called the park rangers. The rangers searched the ravine. They found nothing. No handprints, no bones, no evidence that anyone had been there. They said I probably got disoriented, dehydrated, imagined it. But I have the photos, dozens of photos of the handprints, of the bone arrangement. When I try to show them to people, the images are corrupted, blurred beyond recognition, like something doesn't want them seen. I developed PTSD. I can't go into the woods anymore. I can't even look at trees without panicking. I see a therapist. I take medication. Nothing helps, because I know what I saw was real, and I know it's still out there, in that ravine, waiting for the next hiker to wander off the trail, the next person to ignore the warnings. I was hiking the Superior Trail in Minnesota. It was a solo trip in late September. I'd been on the trail for 3 days when I noticed something was wrong. I was walking in circles. I kept passing the same rock formation, the same fallen tree, over and over. But my GPS showed I was making progress, moving forward. My map and compass both said I should have been 5 miles from where I started that morning. Yet I kept seeing the same landmarks. I sat down to rest, trying to figure out what was happening. That's when I noticed the trees. They were moving, not swaying from the wind, moving, shifting positions. I watched a pine tree slowly slide 10 feet to the left. No sound, just movement. I stood up and started walking quickly. The trees moved faster, closing in, creating a narrow path and forcing me in a specific direction. I tried to go another way, but the trees blocked me. Branches interlocked, forming a wall. I followed the path they created and walked for nearly an hour. The trees finally opened into a clearing. In the center stood a cabin, old, weathered, smoke drifting from the chimney. I approached cautiously and knocked on the door. It opened. Inside, it was warm. A fire burned in the hearth. Food sat on the table, but no one was there. I called out. No answer. I stepped inside. The cabin was bigger on the inside than it should have been. Rooms branched off in impossible directions. I turned to leave, but the door was gone. Just a solid wall. I panicked and ran through the cabin, searching for an exit. Every room looked the same. Furniture, fire, food, but no doors, no windows. I ran for what felt like hours. The cabin never ended, just more rooms. Then I heard my name, my mother's voice. She died 5 years ago. I followed the sound and found a room with a door. I opened it, and she was inside, sitting at a table. She smiled and said, "I've been waiting for you." I backed away. She stood up and said, "You can stay here, with me, forever." I ran. I found another door, burst through it, and suddenly I was back outside in the forest. No cabin, no clearing, just trees. My GPS showed I had moved 12 miles, but I'd only been gone an hour. I hiked straight to the trailhead. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I reported everything. The Forestry Service told me there are no cabins in that area. There never have been. But they admitted that other hikers have reported similar experiences. Getting lost, seeing buildings that shouldn't exist, encountering dead loved ones. That section of trail has since been flagged. People are advised to hike in groups and use GPS at all times. I'll never hike solo again, and I'll never go back to Minnesota, because I think that cabin is still out there, still opening its door, still calling people inside, and I don't want to know what happens if you stay. I was hiking in the Pacific Northwest, in Olympic National Forest. I'm an experienced hiker. I've done dozens of solo trips. This was supposed to be a 5-day loop. On the second day, I came across something strange. All the trees in about a 50-foot radius were dead. Not burned, not diseased, just dead. Grey and bare. No leaves, no bark. And in the center was a hole, maybe 6 feet across, perfectly round. I walked to the edge and looked down. I couldn't see the bottom, just darkness. I dropped a rock in. I never heard it hit. I was about to leave when I noticed something else. The air above the hole was shimmering, like heat waves, but it was cold, probably around 40 degrees. I reached my hand over the opening. The air felt thick, heavy, like pushing through water. Then I heard something, a voice coming from the hole, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like my name. I backed away. The whispering got louder, more insistent. I started to feel dizzy. My vision blurred. I felt this overwhelming urge to jump in, to climb down, to see what was at the bottom. I was actually leaning over the edge when I snapped out of it. I ran. I got maybe 100 yards away and looked back. A figure was standing at the edge of the hole, tall, impossibly thin, pale white skin, No features, just smooth white flesh where a face should be. It was facing me. I could feel it watching, even though it had no eyes. I ran until I couldn't breathe, set up camp miles away, didn't sleep, left the next morning and cut my trip short. When I got home, I looked up that area. I found reports going back decades. Hikers disappearing, strange holes in the ground, people reporting feeling compelled to jump, feeling watched. A geologist studied the holes in the 80s. He said they weren't natural. They weren't man-made. There was no explanation for their existence. Several members of his team reported psychological effects, paranoia, suicidal thoughts. The study was discontinued. The area was never officially closed, but rangers don't recommend hiking there. I reported what I saw. They thanked me and said they'd note it. That was it. No follow-up, no investigation. I think they know something they're not telling people. I'll never go back to that forest. And I tell everyone I meet, if you see a perfectly round hole in the ground, if you hear whispering, run. Don't look back. Don't try to investigate. Just run. Because whatever's down there, it wants you. And if you get too close, you won't be able to resist. I was backpacking in Maine, in the 100-mile wilderness. It's a remote section where you have to pack everything because there's no resupply. On the 4th day, I woke up and immediately knew something was wrong. My camp was different. My tent was facing a different direction. My boots were on the opposite side. My pack was unzipped. At first, I thought maybe I'd sleepwalked and moved things around. But then I noticed my food. I had hung it in a bear bag the night before. Now it was on the ground, opened. Nothing was missing, just opened and placed carefully on the dirt. I checked for tracks. There were footprints around my tent, bare feet, human-sized. But the stride was wrong, too far apart, like whatever made them was walking on tiptoes. The prints circled my tent multiple times, then led into the woods. I should have packed up and hiked out, but curiosity got the better of me. I followed the prints. They led to a lean-to, an old shelter that hadn't been used in years. Inside was a sleeping bag. My sleeping bag, the one that should have been in my tent. It was laid out neatly, like someone had been sleeping in it. On top was a piece of bark with a message written in dirt. Thank you. I grabbed my sleeping bag and ran back to camp. I threw everything into my pack and started hiking out immediately. I'd gone maybe 2 miles when I realized I was being followed. I could hear footsteps behind me, matching my pace. When I stopped, they stopped. When I started, they started. I spun around several times but never saw anything. Still, I could hear breathing. I could smell something. An unwashed body. Dirt. Decay. I started running. The footsteps ran too. Faster than me. I could hear them gaining, getting closer. I reached a stream and crossed it. The footsteps stopped at the water's edge. I turned and saw something standing in the trees. A figure. Tall. Thin. Covered in mud and leaves. Watching me. Its face was hidden, but I could see its eyes reflecting light, like an animal's. I kept running. I made it to the trailhead, but when I reached my car, all 4 tires were flat. Slashed. I called for help. A ranger picked me up 3 hours later. We went back to check the car. The tires were fine, fully inflated, no damage. The ranger thought I was having a breakdown. Stress, isolation, exhaustion. He drove me back to my car. I drove home and never went back. I still have that note. Thank you. Written in dirt. I keep it in a drawer. A reminder that something lived in those woods. Something that went through my things, slept in my sleeping bag, followed me. I don't know what it wanted. I don't want to know. I just know I'm never going back. I was hunting in eastern Oregon, deep in a remote canyon. My buddy and I split up to cover more ground, planning to meet back at camp before dark. I was glassing for deer when I heard a gunshot. Then another, then screaming. My buddy was screaming for help. I ran toward the sound and found him standing in a clearing. He was facing away from me, completely still. I called his name. No response. I walked closer and called again. Slowly he turned around. His face was blank, eyes empty, mouth slightly open. Then he raised his rifle and pointed it at me. I dove behind a rock as he fired. The bullet hit inches from my head. I yelled, asking what he was doing. No response. Just another shot. I peeked around the rock. He was walking toward me, methodical, firing every few steps. This wasn't my buddy. Something was wrong. I ran. He chased me, still shooting. I made it into a thick patch of timber and hid behind a tree, trying to catch my breath. I could hear him moving through the woods, searching. Then I heard my voice. My buddy was calling my name. Exactly the way I say it, the same tone, the same inflection. I peeked around the tree. He was standing about 30 feet away, scanning the woods. His movements were mechanical, unnatural, like someone was controlling a puppet. I stayed hidden for 2 hours. Eventually, I heard a vehicle, other hunters. I ran toward the sound, found them, and told them everything. They called the sheriff, and search and rescue went looking for my buddy. They found him 6 hours later, 5 miles from where I'd last seen him, sitting against a tree. Hypothermic, unresponsive. He was taken to the hospital. He recovered physically, but mentally, he was gone. He couldn't remember anything from that day. Couldn't explain why he'd shot at me. Brain scans showed unusual activity. Doctors said it looked like he'd had a seizure, but I know what I saw. That wasn't a seizure. Something took control of him, used him. When he was released, I visited him and asked if he remembered anything. He looked at me with empty eyes and said, "It told me to kill you. Said you were the enemy." I asked what it was. He said, "I don't know, but it's still in the woods, still looking for people, still taking control. My buddy doesn't hunt anymore. He barely leaves his house." I quit too, because if something can take control of a person, make them try to kill their best friend, then nowhere is safe, not even with people you trust. I was bow hunting in Montana, deep in the backcountry, miles from anyone. It was late afternoon, and I was sitting in my tree stand when the forest went completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. That's when I smelled it. Rotting meat, so strong it made my eyes water. I looked down and saw something moving through the brush. At first, I thought it was a bear, but it was walking upright, at least 7 feet tall, covered in dark matted hair. I froze, didn't breathe. It stopped directly beneath my tree. I could hear it breathing, deep, rattling breaths. Then it looked up, right at me. Its face was almost human, but wrong. Sunken eyes, too much forehead, mouth hanging open, showing yellow teeth. We locked eyes for what felt like forever. Then it made a sound, a low rumble that turned into a horrible scream, like a woman being murdered mixed with an elk bugling. The sound echoed through the valley. I nearly fell out of my stand. It turned and walked away, pushing through trees like they were nothing, snapping 8-inch thick pines like twigs. When I couldn't hear it anymore, I waited another hour. Then I climbed down and hiked the 6 miles back to my truck in record time. I never looked back. When I got home, I reported it to Fish and Game. The officer went quiet when I described it. He said 3 other hunters had reported something similar in that area over the past month. All experienced outdoorsmen, all terrified. Off the record, he told me there have been reports in those mountains for decades. Native Americans won't go there. They call it forbidden ground. I've hunted for 20 years. Elk, bear, mountain lion. I know what animals look like, how they smell, how they move. That wasn't an animal. Or if it was, it's nothing that's supposed to exist. I sold all my hunting gear. I haven't been back to the woods since. Sometimes at night, I still hear that scream. I still see those eyes staring up at me. My wife asks why I don't hunt anymore. I tell her I lost interest. But the truth is, I'm terrified. Whatever that thing was, it could have killed me, easily. But it chose to walk away, and I don't want to know what happens if I ever see it again.